Welcome to the shop, Steve here at SKS Props, and not long ago I created a chibi style pram for my baby Grogu, aka Baby Yoda, because he's still Baby Yoda in my heart. Now if you want to build one of these, the plans are still available on my website. They're absolutely free, and I've had a ton of people build this, and it's awesome to see your guys' creations. I wanted to continue this display piece and add some additional accessories, which is why I made the control knob and the macaron cookie. Both of these accessories are magnetic, so they actually just attach right to his hands with magnets or the force. Now these are made out of different materials, so like the control knob here is a ping pong ball and foam clay. The cookie is HD foam, which you of course can find over at Blick Art Materials. Now I want to show you guys what it takes to put these accessories together so you can customize your own doll. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I need to do is figure out how these accessories are going to attach to his palm, so I need to cut off his hands. Each one of his hands has a small zip tie at the base of the hard plastic. The zip tie was cut with some hobby snips, which allowed the hard plastic hand to be removed from the cloth arm. This process was done to both sides. I need to drill out the inside of his wrist so I can insert magnets into the palm of his hand. Now inside the collar of this hand there's a really hard piece of plastic. I ended up using my drill to remove as much material as possible, and once I was almost to the edge I used some pliers to remove the excess. Once both wrists had been drilled out, I went to my tool chest and grabbed a pack of rare earth magnets. These little magnets are crazy powerful for their size and will work great to attach the accessories to his hands. One magnet is dropped into his palm while another magnet is on the opposite side, and then a little bit of super glue is poured in just to make sure that the magnet is adhered in the correct position. Now there's a lot of open space inside of here and I want to fill it to make sure that the magnet never has an opportunity to shift and move. And to do that I'm going to be using my lightweight foam clay. This material is super easy to sculpt with, but it works great in this application as a filler. Once I've pressed in enough material with the silicone tip tool that it's actually forcing its way back out, I know I have enough material inside the hand. So I fill the hole with a small plug of 6mm HD foam, and then I glue a circle of 2mm HD foam to the very top. Now as of right now, this will retain a lot of the moisture within the clay, but eventually all that will wick out and it'll become rock hard, but still retain the ability to be very light. Once the hand is full of foam clay and the magnet is set, I can insert a new zip tie into the cloth wrist. This zip tie easily slips back through the stitched line, and then it's just a process of tightening it and cutting off the excess. Now I didn't have any white zip ties on hand, but these black ones will work fine and they pretty much get covered up by his robe anyway. To fabricate the control knob I'm going to be using a ping pong ball, but I need to cut this in half, so the first thing to do is mark the seam line with a pencil. After that I take it over to my bandsaw and easily cut it in half. Now if you don't have a bandsaw it's no problem, you could use a cutting wheel on your rotary tool. Once the ball had been cut in half I use a sanding sponge to remove any of the plastic burrs that might have been left behind. With a magnet placed onto his palm I mark the opposite side so I don't get it mixed up. This magnet is going to be glued to the inside of the ping pong ball right around here. So as a first step I use some Bob Smith super glue to tack it into place. Then I cut out a circle of 2mm foam and glue that on top of the magnet into the inside of the ping pong ball. This will make sure that the magnet does not move from this spot. Once the adhesive had set up, I checked it with the magnetic force of the palm, and this half of the ball holds great. Now originally I thought about making this out of a wooden sphere, but then I thought that it might be a little too heavy. So with the ping pong ball I'm going to fill each half with foam clay just to make sure this stays as light as possible. More clay is added to each side than really needed, and these are set aside to dry. Fabrication on this side is now complete so I can attach his other hand. Once again a small zip tie is fed through the cloth arm. Then the plastic hand can be inserted and the zip tie can be pulled tight. Any excess material can then be trimmed away and he's good as new. After about a day the foam clay has dried enough that it can now be glued into place and sanded flush. Super glue is added along the edge and the foam clay is then glued to the inside of the ping pong ball. Once both halves have been glued into place, a sanding sponge is then used to remove any excess material. And now the base for our control knob feels a lot more substantial. Now there's a small raised gap in between these two halves, and to fabricate that I'm going to cut out a circle of 1mm HD foam. I cut out the circle with some shears and I check for fit. Once I'm satisfied that it looks great, I then go ahead and glue the 1mm foam to the foam clay. I then apply adhesive to the opposite side and line up the two halves. And you can see even with that excess material in there, it's still light enough to have a perfect magnetic connection. Now the top of the knob is actually flat and then it has a small circular button. So I first take my Dremel rotary tool and remove the top and then use a sanding sponge to clean it up. Then I again use some Bob Smith super glue and glue a 15mm circle directly to the top. I mark the bottom center of the ping pong ball. I'm going to drill out and remove some of the material so it looks like this is where it would have screwed onto the rod. To open this hole up, I start off with some drill bits, and then move on to a Dremel rotary tool sanding drum and then a stone sphere bit. This has opened up the plastic enough that I can now take a 3/8 inch dowel and press the proper shape into the material. The final detail for this is I take a large bolt and press it along the interior sides. This gives the foam clay some grooves and makes the prop look more authentic. Now while I wait for the control knob to dry, I also want him to be able to hold a cookie. So I start by using my circle jig and cutting 2 circles out of some 4mm HD foam. These circles are cut to about 1 7/8 inches. This will end up being the top and bottom of the cookie. For the inside of the cookie, I cut out a smaller circle out of 2mm HD foam, and I use foam clay to act as the filling. Now to make sure my magnet placement is correct, I leave the magnet on his hand. I once again mark the opposite side so I don't glue it in incorrectly. Then I take one of the 4mm halves and I press it firmly onto the magnet. This will leave an impression in the foam. I can then use my stone sphere bit to remove enough material that the magnet can easily be glued into place. Once the glue had cured, I put some water on this side of the foam and press some more foam clay onto it. The water helps the foam clay adhere to the foam. After it was attached, I can then use a silicone tip sculpting tool to add some additional details to the side. These halves were then set aside for a couple of hours so that the foam clay could skin over. I could then use some Bob Smith superglue to glue the top, middle, and bottom all together. And I keep checking just to make sure that the magnetic connection is still good. Now at the top of the cookie, I'd like it to look as though he's taken a few bites, so I use a pencil to mark on the foam. So I once again break out my Dremel rotary tool with a smooth sanding drum and round over the top and the bottom of the cookie. Then I use a smaller, coarser drum to simulate the bite marks. This drum is just moved up and down through the foam and the foam clay until I get the look that I'm going for. And then after that's complete, I lightly hit the surface of the prop with a heat gun to seal it off. And there we have our little HD foam cookie. To get the control knob ready for paint, I'm going to start by using some black Krylon primer. While that's drying, I can go ahead and paint the cookie, and to do that I'm going to be using Liquitex Heavy Body Brilliant Blue and Turquoise Green. These paints are mixed together until I get the shade that I like. Then using a filbert brush, this mixture is painted all over this foam cookie. Once it was covered, a hairdryer was used to speed up the dry time, and then a second layer was applied. The control knob is now dry, so I start by applying some Utrecht brand Ivory Black. This paint is going to be applied horizontally to try to give it a spun metal look. To give this control knob a metallic sheen, I'm once again going to be using graphite powder. I used this on my Mando blaster not long ago, and it's a really convincing way to get a metallic look. This graphite powder is spread all over the surface of the control knob with a shop cloth, and then to get that shine, the graphite is buffed. I also use a Q-tip to get the graphite powder into the ridges in the cutout on the bottom of the knob. To paint the button at the very top of the knob, I'm going to be using Liquitex Heavy Body Cobalt Blue. This paint is applied with a small filbert brush to the top and the sides. Now the graphite powder is only a base, and as cool as it looks, it's just not bright enough, so I'm going to be using some Rub and Buff Silver. This is a wax-based product, and a little bit goes a long way. I also apply this with a shop cloth over the entire surface, and once complete, it's also buffed to give it that metallic sheen. You can really see a difference by adding the Rub and Buff versus just the graphite powder here. I touch up the sides and the top to the button, and I also want it to have a sheen, so I'm going to add some Vallejo brand gloss varnish. This varnish can just be applied with a brush and then locked in using a hairdryer. I decided to use a wash of the Ivory Black on the opening on the bottom, and I removed the excess paint with a Q-tip. This same paint was also applied to the groove all the way around the knob. I give the control knob one last buff with a clean paper towel, and I'm calling this prop done. So you all can see the steps that it takes to make some custom accessories for your own baby Grogu, aka Baby Yoda. Now these were super simple to put together, and these applications can be applied to a lot of other techniques in cosplay, or if you wanted to customize other dolls or toys that you have. Now hopefully you guys learned something from this video, and if you did, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends and family, and until next time, build your best with the best HD foam.